This is lesson number 3 in our series on Good to Great. Several years ago, I was introduced to this book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, a secular book dealing with the stock market in New York City. And I was amazed as I read the concepts that they discovered in what they call great companies, that these are biblical concepts. This particular lesson is called Facing the Brutal Facts. Facing the Brutal Facts. And we're going to discover how to take truth, apply it to our lives so that we can fulfill the destiny that God has given to us. One of the worst mistakes that a leader can make is to make promises that they do not keep. Holding out false promises to the people. That's one of the worst things that you can do, because if we make promises but we don't keep them, then people lose confidence in our leadership. And if people lose confidence in us, then they stop following us. And so it is a terrible mistake. All successful leaders have got to have good information to be able to make good decisions. Now, that is crucial, that we learn how to discover truth. The truth. What is the truth? Now, what good leadership does, it creates this climate where truth can be heard and where the brutal facts can be confronted. For instance, let me give you a good illustration of this. Winston Churchill, leader of the United Kingdom in World War II. Winston Churchill, they asked him one day, "Sir Winston, how can you sleep at night knowing there's a war going on?" And this was his reply: "I can sleep at night as long as I have the facts." What he had developed was a war correspondence news network that was separate from politics, that was separate from the military, because he said if it's a part of the military, they're going to try to make themselves look good. If it's a part of politics, they're always going to have their agenda. He said, all I want is the facts, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And if I've got the facts, I can go to sleep at night. Now that's a good illustration. But the truth is, we cannot make good decisions if we're not willing to confront these brutal facts, the brutal facts of life. Now, what are brutal facts? Brutal facts are the things that make your skin crawl. It's the things that keep you awake at night. As one man said, the things that go bump in the night, the things that wake you up and you can't sleep. That's the brutal facts that we're talking about. Now, that is not only true in our personal lives, it's true in all of life. For instance, when I do a lot of flying, and I've flown millions of miles, and in the aircraft, there's designed a feature they call the black box. In the black box is all the vital information about that airplane. If the engines are running, what speed they're running, what the level of fuel is, everything, what their altitude is, how fast they are moving, all of that is recorded information in the black box. So anytime that there is any kind of an accident, that's the first thing that the investigators look for. They can find the black box. It will give them all kinds of good information about what went wrong. Now, that's what we have to discover in our own personal lives, in our church, in our community, even in our families. We've got to confront the facts. What's in the black box? Now, this is the process that moves organizations such as those companies on Wall Street that move from being good companies to becoming great companies. This is what they did that helped them through that process. The process of moving from good to great is determined by being able to discover what's in the black box, or what are the brutal facts of life, and how you deal with those. This is the illustration I gave you in the previous lessons on building momentum. And we talked about the first thing that you have to do in building momentum is surround yourself with the right people. You may remember the statement, people are not your greatest asset. The right people are. So if you get the right people around you and then you allow them in this process of helping you to develop your disciplined thoughts. It's when we move from disciplined people into disciplined thoughts, that's where the breakthrough occurs. That's where you begin transforming from good into great. Oh, may God help us to understand this principle. I think this is one of the biggest factors in life, that so many people just go through life without learning anything. We've got to learn how to discipline ourselves, to discipline our thoughts so that we can fulfill our destiny. Now, a good illustration in the Bible of this is when Jesus stood before Pilate. Pilate, the Roman governor, said to Jesus, "What is truth?" Now, the truth is, Pilate did not care about the truth. He wasn't interested in the truth. If he'd have been interested in the truth, he would have listened to Jesus. But instead of listening to Jesus, he turns away from him after he asks that statement. He's looking truth right in the eye. There's never been anybody that personified truth more than Jesus Christ, and yet he turns away from him and leaves. Why? He's a politician, that's all. It was just a political game. It's just rhetoric. It's just words, but there's no meaning. Now, when we stop and analyze Pilate's life, what were the brutal facts in Pilate's life? Well, there were many of them. For instance, Rome's disfavor was a brutal fact. Caesar had already warned him, don't allow this uprising to happen again in Jerusalem. They had been having rioting and such, and he had been warned, if you allow it to happen, I'm going to remove you from your position. So Rome's disfavor, that's a brutal fact. Another one was Jewish disloyalty. The Jews hated him. They hated Rome, anything that represented Rome. And so the Jews are going to use any opportunity they can to make Pilate look bad. That's a brutal fact. Another one is Jerusalem's violence. In other words, they had a tendency to respond to anything they don't like with violence. And they're just a passionate people. And so that's a brutal fact that you've got to deal with, particularly when you're already under Rome's disfavor. I was teaching this once, and I asked the class, what was something else? And I felt one young man came up with an excellent insight. He said, Pilate refused to listen to the people that loved him the most. Boy, that is a good insight. Excellent insight. Because Pilate's wife probably was the only person in Jerusalem that cared anything personally about him, and yet he wouldn't listen to her. Boy, those are brutal facts. And because he was not willing to confront the brutal facts, we know the history, he had Jesus crucified. He crucified the truth. There's a good verse of scripture in Proverbs 23:23, where he says, buy the truth and do not sell it. Boy, that's a strong statement. The truth is, many people do sell the truth. They're willing to take the easy way out. They're willing to take shortcuts. And what I've discovered, most shortcuts are detours to a dead end. Now, the Apostle Paul talks about this in the book of 2 Thessalonians 2:10. He's talking about the end time, and he said that there's going to come terrible deception on the earth. There's going to be terrible problems that's going to arise. And then he inserts this phrase, because they did not receive the love of the truth. Wow, what a powerful statement. It brings the question to us, do you love the truth? Do you love the truth? Are you willing to buy the truth no matter what it costs you? Trivia will cost you everything in the end. Believing a lie will destroy your life. It's better to pay the price to get the truth so that you can fulfill your destiny. Now, I want to give you some points here on what I'm going to call creating a climate of truth. How do we develop this atmosphere? Because as I've already said, some people, they don't want the truth. You tell them the truth and you're going to face a big explosion. I mean, the truth is the last thing they want to hear. And those people are headed for disaster. Disaster. It's better to get the truth and deal with it. Like Winston Churchill said, I can sleep as long as I know the facts, the truth. Oh, but if you don't know the truth, then you're building on sand, my friend. Here's the way that we go about do this and do this, accomplish it. Number one, learn to lead with questions, not answers. Now, that's a fundamental mistake that so many leaders make, is they assume they know too much. They assume that they know what's going on. The best way to find out what's going on is ask questions. Learn to ask good questions. Now, I have to caution you here, because if you ask the wrong questions, guess what? You're going to get the wrong answers. But if we learn to ask the right questions, oh my, a good question at the right time can unlock all types of information, and we discover facts, truth that we did not even know existed. So learn to lead from questions. Jesus did this. You look at the life of Christ, he's with his disciples, and we can't say they're always the smartest boys on the block, you know. I mean, some of their statements leave us incredulous. How could you say that, talking to Jesus? But yet Jesus continually questioned them. It's interesting the way he would respond to that, and he was always asking them some kind of question. Many times, he already knew the answer. He's not asking because he doesn't know. He's asking to see if they know. Now, if Jesus did that, what an example for you and I. See, wisdom learns from the answers to the right questions. Boy, there's two basic ways that you can learn the lesson. You can learn it the hard way, get all the scars and the hard knocks, or you can learn it from someone else that's already gone through that, and you don't have to have all those scars. You don't have to go through what they went through to learn that. So wisdom is learning to ask the right questions and get that information that you need to make the proper decision. Now, here's the second thing I want to talk about. Learn to engage in dialogue and debate, not in coercion. Now, let me repeat that again, because this is excellent insight. And they discovered this in Wall Street from these companies that became great companies. They engaged in what they called dialogue and debate. They would bring their leadership around a table, and they would bring up the hot topics, whatever it was they were discussing. And I mean, they would debate that. Now, I know our daughters always said that Evelyn and I were arguing, and probably they were right at least a portion of the time, but we would say, no, we're discussing it. And they said, well, why are your ears so red while you're discussing it, you know? But because we were passionate. And that's what they said to these companies that became great companies, that sometimes the dialogue would become so intense that they were shouting at each other. They're so passionate about it. Learn to engage in dialogue and debate. Don't attack the person, but discuss the idea. Discuss it. Don't try to force your opinion on someone else until you have heard their side of the story. Boy, I've been amazed how many times that I thought I knew what I was talking about, and I did with certain information. But when I got new information, it changed the whole situation, the whole understanding. And so learn how to engage in dialogue and debate and not in coercion, trying to force it. See, this intense dialogue is a necessary part of discovering the truth. Now, I'm very thankful that in my marriage that I learned very early on that I could not treat my wife and did not want to treat my wife like my father treated my mother. My father and mother came from the older generation where the man was always right. And father knows best. And my dad, in his mind, he was sincere about this. It's the way he was raised. He believed there was two ways of doing things. There was his way and there was a wrong way. And you didn't question anything. He missed so much in life because he tried to force his opinion on everybody else. Well, you can guess what happened when the children started growing up. They start rebelling against that, and my poor mother was just subdued under that, and it never was able to live a full life as she should have lived. And I realized early on, I don't want my wife to be like that. She's my most valuable ally in our conquest, and what we're going to try to accomplish. I need to hear from her, even when I don't like what she's saying. It's one of the things I say, I always hate it when she's right. But the truth is, I need that. I need somebody to keep me in checks and balance. Don't tell me you knew I was making a mistake after I have blown it. Now, here's a third thing. A third thing that they discovered, if you're going to develop this climate of truth, learn to conduct what they called autopsies without blame and guilt. An autopsy, that's when something's dead, something died, and now we're going to find out why it died, why it didn't work. Now, what we need to do, and every one of us need this in our lives, because not everything we're doing is what we ought to be doing, particularly if we're going somewhere. You've got to learn how to conduct these autopsies without blame and guilt. See, it's not necessary to blame someone. That's always a way to shut people down. It's your fault. Be careful about when you start pointing your finger, when you start sentences with you. Just be very careful about that. It's not necessary to blame anybody. If it's not working, it's not working. So let's find out, why did this thing die on us? Why is it not being successful? Just search for understanding and learning and try to discover the truth. What is the truth in this situation? The fourth thing that we need to develop in this climate of truth is build what they call red flag mechanisms. That where people can blow the whistle, boy, people that blow the whistle in a lot of organizations, they get the axe. They get cut out real fast because nobody wants somebody that's pointing out the faults, the bad things, the mistakes. Nobody wants that. But the truth is, if we don't understand what we did wrong, we are destined to repeat our mistakes. And that's a sad thing, to see people that go through a failure after failure and learn nothing. They continue to repeat it again and again in life. Build red flag mechanisms. In other words, develop a type of system where people can talk to you. They can discuss the difficult things in life. And we all have them. We all have them. We all struggle with those things. Don't tell me you're perfect. No, none of us are. None of us are. And I know you thought she was an angel when you married her, but you should have read your Bible and discovered angels don't get married. And so, it's none of us are perfect. We can all learn, and all of us have areas where we can improve. It's a good statement. The greatest room in the whole world is the room for improvement. That is a good statement. And so develop a system where people can discuss the difficult things without penalty. That you're not going to look at them as a troublemaker. No, There's somebody that cares enough to tell you the truth. Now learn how to speak it in love. The Bible said that, speak the truth in love. So learn how to do it. Learn how to smile while you're talking about difficult things. I'm not mad at you, but I know this is something that needs to be corrected. I said to a gentleman just today, I was talking to him about a problem that I knew his organization had, and I said, if I had a problem in my organization, I would want somebody to tell me the truth. And I'm simply telling you, I know there's a problem here, so you need to try to find out where the problem is and fix it. That's what I'm talking about. Red flags without penalty. Without penalty. This is what they call turning the information into brutal facts that cannot be ignored. Things that, okay, this is something we're going to have to change. We're going to have to deal with this. I'll give you an illustration. One of the companies that was pointed out going from good to great was Walgreens. Walgreens had been known for years been famous for its milkshakes that you could get at Walgreens. The new CEO said, but we are not a restaurant. We are a pharmacy. I'm giving you 5 years to get out of the restaurant business. They came back together 6 months later, and as they came back together, somebody jokingly said, well, you know what the boss said? He's giving us 5 years to get out of the restaurant business. And he spoke up and said, 4 years and 6 months. And they said, suddenly we realized he's serious about this. And so today you don't go to Walgreens to get your milkshakes. But the truth is, I would rather go to Walgreens than to go to Walmart because I can get in and out a whole lot easier. Now, that's what they were saying. This is the thing that we're going to be. This is what we're going to accomplish. So we've got to cut out the restaurant business. That's brutal facts. Brutal facts. Now, this is what you've got to learn to do. Learn to face the facts of the things that you don't do well. Like my daughters told me years ago, it's amazing, those little girls that we thought were angels that grew up, and man, I told Evelyn one day, you know what's wrong with these girls? We've told them since they were babies how smart they are, and they've grown up believing us. And but I remember some wise counsel they gave me. Daddy, you just preach. Let Mama sing. Boy, that was good counsel. You know why? I can preach pretty good, but I'm not a good singer. I never will be a great singer. I don't have the voice for it. Now, I can growl pretty good, but that's not singing. And so learn the things that you don't do well. Delegate that to someone else. See, we've got to have faith if we're going to be winners. You've got to have faith. But in fact, this is what the scripture says in 1 John 5:4. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. You've got to have that. But it's not enough just to have faith. We also need the discipline to confront the brutal facts and deal with them. What are those things in our lives that we need to be doing an autopsy? Understanding why that didn't work for us and cutting that out of our lives. If we will learn to do these things, then our life is going to be much more successful. And we're going to be able to fulfill the destiny of what God has called us to do. If we don't discipline ourselves in these areas, then we're going to continue to repeat the mistakes of the past. And the sad thing of it is, I see a lot of good people that's trying to do something that they're really not gifted to do. And because of that, they're frustrated. The people around them are frustrated. It's one of the great secrets of life. Ignoring problems doesn't make them disappear. It's what they call the invisible elephant in the room. What they mean is that subject nobody wants to talk about. Everybody knows it's there. Everybody can see it, but nobody wants to talk about it. the invisible elephant. What do you do with the elephant? Well, I tell you, some of the best advice I've ever heard about elephants is simply take the time to dissect the elephant and then eat him one bite at a time. You can deal with the difficult problems if you do it step by step, stage by stage. If you take the time to develop this climate of truth where you're willing to hear the truth, even when it hurts, even when it's something that we don't want to hear, every one of us need that. And if we will learn that, then it will help us to overcome these difficult areas of life. And the truth is, how we deal with the inevitable difficulties in life are going to determine much of our success. Not every day is going to be an easy day. In fact, one of the things I've discovered in life, that just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Boy, that is so true. See, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy. And so if we're going to accomplish it, this is one of the things that we must learn to do. Face the brutal facts. What are the brutal facts in your life? What are the things in your life that you need to be cutting out of your life, that you need to be doing an autopsy? What are the things that you need to be sitting down with the people that love you the most, that love you enough to tell you the truth, and ask them, what do I need to change? How do I need to change? How do I need to do this? Because all of us have areas in our life where we struggle. Every one of us do. But we don't have to live that way. That's the reason God gives us family and friends. If we surround ourselves with the right people and allow them access into our lives, they can help us with the brutal facts. I pray these things help you with your spiritual journey